6+ acres. It'll be just somewhat larger than what the area is now that contains the vehicles.
Any more questions?
Mr. Chairman? Yep. I drove by your property on 8 Mile, and it appears that there's room for these vehicles there.
That is a possibility.
Why aren't you taking them to that location
We already
and getting
have.
rid of them here?
Okay, I purchased the Natrona property in 1998, and of course it already had some vehicles on it, and we put some additional ones there. However, we thought we were grandfathered, and in court we found out that we were not.
I understand that.
Of course, 8 Mile is, and that isn't, so that's why I'm here trying to bring the Natrona property into compliance with the conditional use permit.
I understand your wife's comments about bringing the neighborhood, the pictures and all, to me,
Right,
frankly, are insignificant. We're not talking about these other properties.
right.
Charge of the county commissioners really is to clean up these types of areas and not increase the numbers on, let's call it gateway
Right.
places into Casper. You could, if you're going to move some of those vehicles away, because they're junk, as you said.
Right, that is correct.
You could move the others into your other lot on 8
Well,
Mile.
the person could, but I don't want to put a lot more stuff on the 8 Mile property. It's somewhat crowded as it is, and I'd rather leave it somewhat open for appearance reasons and whatnot.
Which begs my question then, a 6-foot fence for the school bus and the large tractor issues out there will not shield those from the public.
We have a building that's fairly tall out there that we intended to put the tractors behind, and then of course the small trucks and the cars, actually the 6-foot would shield it, and then that building would shield the taller trucks. And of course there's not going to be that many big trucks out there anyway.
Is that the building that's there now that I can see from the highway? It's not going on your property, but that's apparently an old house, which...
Well, there's a house, and there's also another outbuilding, and we'd be talking about the outbuilding. And there's currently a 4,000-gallon tank pump trailer parked behind that, and it shields that from the highway. So the tall Peterbilt or Kenworth would be similar to that.
But there's several of those on the property. Now,
Several.
I don't, you know, in my looking at that, my view is you can't hide enough of that stuff behind a house.
Right.
Some of that's going to show.
Yeah, some of that will be gone too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any more questions for Mr. Jones? Okay, thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this agenda item?
Just these letters, the letters that came, hold on, okay.
My name is Hank Bowers, and I live on 170 North 8 Mile Road. I am Dana's closest neighbor, and I recently went out to his property there at Natrona, just using an eye level and stepping it off, kind of surveyed as what it would take. As far as screening that, you used to be on your county regulations, you had a regulation that stated a fence could not be taller than 8 foot, then it would have to have a variance if it was taller. Is that still on the books?
I have to defer to Mr. Knight. I'm not sure.
I think it probably is, but anyway, 8-foot fence, that's another 2 foot. The way that property lays, the way it lies, it won't take that much fence, because he doesn't need that big area. But you put stuff behind the fence, okay, if you put a berm over this way, and on the end to isolate from that creek, which is quite a ways off, but then you would create another foot down, save the topsoil, move that dirt, put the topsoil back on and seed it, and that would increase the height of the fence trajectory. Okay, and I did shoot that out a little bit, very feasible, well, easy to do. Dirt is very pliable, we like that. So, but anyway, it's quite feasible, and I think with the screen, with that stuff being screened, why, it'd be a vast improvement to the neighborhood. That's my opinion. I've drove that road many times. I worked out at Y-Site for quite a while and drove it every day. The highlight was when I went by there to see what cars and goats were climbing on. And I kind of missed that, really. I think Dana ought to get some goats. But anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'm Harry Bondi, and I represent Dana and Judy Jones, and have for about 4 years of this ordeal. We were the ones that initiated the suit in the district court so we could get some resolution. Following the decision from the district court, the 19-page decision, we're here to comply with it. Yes, Dana Jones could, Mr. Bailey, move those cars. That's a horrific expense, just so you know. He didn't bring that up, but with the 166 cars. Now, a few of those cars, so you know, I don't know that Dana addressed it with you, but the bus, the high ride, those can be moved. Okay? I believe that when you move about 3, at a maximum 6 of those, a bus, we can go out and count them. When you move those, the issue of height is history. So I would, well, maybe we have some people here that can talk about it. But I know that we have some people that can talk about how many vehicles out there cannot be screened by a 6-foot fence. And if they're going to get more than 6, we can get down and bet about it. But there's a couple of buses that stick out. A couple of the others can be placed behind the structure. So I think that's a ruse. I do not think that should be an obstacle. But that brings up, as I understand it, as I looked on the posting for planning and zoning, not too long ago, hours ago, there was a recommendation to pass. Now the recommendation is to take a vote, to admit or deny. As I understand the reason for the change in staff's recommendation are the 6 letters that you have. And no one has yet spoke to those, and I want to just touch them very briefly. I've arranged them in the order that they came in. The first one was from a gentleman by the name of Bennett, Robert Bennett. I just can't read his first name. It's the only handwritten one of the 6. It seems that his objections are 1, 2, 3. He says he bought the property, and he liked the property when he bought it without a junkyard. I don't know that that's very persuasive if he doesn't want to tell us when he bought it. Because it was Tom Holmes who started collecting vehicles out there in the 60s when he was running a tow truck on the Shoshone Highway. And he'd pull them in. Sometimes they go elsewhere. A lot of times they would stay, and some of them are still there. And other folks in the area, if you notice it, it's not isolated to central Wyoming. You can go to a lot of places in Wyoming where there's starting to be a collection of what some people value, antique cars and trucks. Then a bunch more show up with them. And that's exactly what Tom Holmes had going on too. But the gentleman that wrote on March of 4, he doesn't seem to want to recognize that there were quite a few cars there when he bought. Number 2, he doesn't seem to be aware that there's concepts of screening, or that Jones's application has specifically said there would be screening. So I question whether or not Robert Bennett, the handwritten, if that should be any reason to change the staff recommendation. He does use the word risky salvage business. You know, some people think raising hogs is risky business. I think it's risky business running a plumbing shop. But the point for us is, there's been a lot of county folks on the property, and no one has pointed out a hazardous issue or a potential hazardous issue. Later on, another nice taxpayer says, batteries and metal are bad for the soil. She summarily doesn't know that these batteries have been removed. All of those vehicles out there, Jones's training takes you back to 2 generations from handling hazardous materials. The tanks are drained, the transfer cases are drained. There's nothing to substantiate. You can't just call something risky unless you've got a certain fail ratio. They don't seem to have that at the Jones property. The second letter was Timothy McGrath. He says he purchased it 2 years ago. He purchased it relying that there wouldn't be any visions that he looked out in his area that he'd have to see, any distance. There isn't really a lot of dispute that Tom Combs has started collecting cars in the 30s. Nothing showed up in the last 2 years out there. It's not a meritorious objection. It's kind of like, what is it, NEMI? We need some affordable housing, but not in my neighborhood. It's a matter of taste. This is not a matter of if anyone has brought something that's detrimental to anyone's attention. Detrimental, they don't like what they see, but that isn't, I don't think, the way it works. The third letter was Charles Putnam, the major artery, oblivious. His letter is oblivious, makes no mention of screening. The screening here, except for, as Mr. Bailey's discussed, screening would take care of it, but for a few vehicles. Then Putnam goes on to talk about you folks ought to adopt the BLM rules. But he doesn't tell you what those rules are. I think there's enough rules, and I think the criteria that the commission has established for the granting or denying of an application are what need to be examined by this commission, not what BLM thinks. But again, it's the uninformed comments here, and someone's got to point that out. We wouldn't want that to stifle citizen comment, but to say that to continue storing what began in the 30s needs industrial and infrastructure support. I'm not sure what that means. There's a well on the property. There's a septic tank on the property, not needing any assistance from the county. I don't know that Mr. Putnam's objection saying we need infrastructure. I'm not sure what that means, because we're not talking about pulverizing these vehicles and running them down a slurry. They're staying on location. At one time, it was county zoning and Department of Agriculture personnel that encouraged vehicles to be placed in a creek bed, and it was called riprap. Changed now, they want them out. Jones hasn't made that a problem. When we met with staff, we talked about which of that area is the closest to Casper Creek, and none of it has been a problem yet. But I understand from planning, you look at the 50-year plan or the 100-year plan. But Putnam's looking for infrastructure. I'm not sure that could be a meritorious objection. Bob Ehrlich is the second to last one. He talks about close proximity. I don't know where Mr. Ehrlich's place is. I've never seen any livestock around Jones' property. I don't think anyone has seen any livestock there. No doubt the land is owned by people. No doubt the adjacent land is somewhere. How proximate, I don't know. But there's nothing that's going to be downwind, or excuse me, upwind from his cattle or his livestock. There's nothing going on there that there would be pollutants going on. He, again, like others, mentions a poor visual from the highway. You get a poor visual for a lot of things. But the point is, that visual was the way it is, and Mr. Ehrlich's two ranches came in later. And that's pretty much a concept that you're going to have to live with, Mr. Ehrlich. He mentions this pollution business. Again, there's been no comment from anyone that there's pollution going on out there. These vehicles don't pollute because you set them on the ground. The final comment, though, received was from Arlene Wilmon. So for Crest Financial, she seems to be buying property, and she says, our contract says that you can't do all these things. Well, maybe if they have that's an issue then, and maybe they need to enforce the covenants, but she's talking about contracts and whether Jones is required to perform under that contract. Pollute groundwater. There's absolutely no substantiation that there's any pollution of groundwater going on. People have been out there to look. People are trained at those items. So I don't know that the 6 letters, because they don't like the idea, because they're proximate, maybe my house is proximate too. I mean, how proximate are you? What's the problem here? I only want to clarify one matter. I don't want to drag it on. Just want to make sure you understood what Mrs. Jones was pointing out. I handed her, these are photographs that she assembled from Google. When you start with Exhibit 1, you're starting at the Fremont-Natrona County line. And you're coming this way until you get to the town of Casper. And that's what each one of these. So Floyd's Junkyard is there. Again, the purpose here is we're not saying something should be done about these properties. One of the criteria that the commission has in order to evaluate is whether or not character of their neighborhood. Does it detrimentally affect the character of the neighborhood? We're trying to show what the character along 2026 is. And there's 8 pictorials here, 8 properties. One is Jones, that's number 4. The other 7 on both sides of the highway. And we're not changing the character of what's on 2026. And that's all we wanted to do there. We're not picking on these folks. You get the Google photographs, we could also take some shots at ground level. That's all I really wanted to address was I thought when we saw the, I pointed to the screen because at one time it was on screen, it was on my screen, where the staff made a recommendation to pass. And as I heard Mr. Gutierrez this evening, that was before they got the comments. I do not see the comments as bringing any serious environmental matters here because they don't like looking out their window and seeing what's been there a few years. That's not something this commission can help them with. Again, I don't think it's so much legal, but if there's any matter that I can answer, you bet I'd give it a shot. Think it all?
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to address a couple things to Mr. Bondi. First of all, I'm not trying to defend the staff and what they do or what they don't do, but I will tell you that this is the first time I've seen any comments tonight about this. So if that triggered his change, then that was for us to be able to consider the comments. I've not seen these before, and so they were in before the meeting. Therefore, they probably, and I'm guessing that we can talk to him about, but they're guessing, I'm guessing, that those were for us to be considered, and he wanted us to know that those were there, okay? He had the ability to change that thing right up until 5 minutes before you walked in here. I had no problem with that, okay? Second of all, how big is the neighborhood? You said from Fremont County to Casper. That's a damn big neighborhood. And once again, we're not talking about those people. We're talking about this piece of property. And therefore, our charge, one of our charges as this board and the county commissioners were very, brought this up to me personally when I was appointed to it. This is for your knowledge. I was appointed to fill a 6-month seat last summer, and one of their questions to me was, do you have a problem with what we're doing in cleaning things up? And I said, no, not at all. And so it's very important to the county commissioner to clean up these gateway areas, and that has been happening. A question that I have, 2 more questions. Will you state your law license that there's not a drop of fluid running out of those vehicles on that ground? That's a yes
I'd be
or no
glad to
question.
do that, but I go out and check it.
You'd do that first,
Fair
wouldn't you?
question?
You'd do that first, wouldn't you? So you're taking somebody else's wording and telling us that there's no fluid in there. And that may or may not be a true statement. Okay? And then I have a question about the lawsuit, and you're obviously involved in it. What was the fourth cause of action in your second complaint? In your second amended complaint?
Probably estoppel and waiver.
Okay.
What's
Because
the
that's
reason
where,
for- What's the point of that question?
well, that's why you're here. Because I read the lawsuit judgment, and I can't find where it says for you guys to come do this.
Do what?
To come in front of this board, in front of the county commissioners to get a zoning change. I mean, so it's, don't blame it on the lawsuit if you're coming to get it right after the lawsuit. But that was not part of this lawsuit, is that a true statement? The judge didn't tell you to do that, did he?
Mr. Bailey, I'm not sure I understand the question. But
Let me rephrase it. Did the judge tell you to come in front of this body to get a zoning change out of, or a conditional use permit for this property?
no, he did not. So you didn't miss a thing.
You brought it on, you brought this yourself to come in compliance as a result of this case.
That is correct. What you don't have in this January 2 judgment and
Right,
findings of fact
right.
is the court's ruling on the fourth day of trial with respect to the Natrona property, which we're talking about today. And he says from the evidence we've presented, the plaintiffs, Jones, have not met their burden of proof on the Natrona property.
Was that the December judgment? Because I have it also.
I don't want to answer that until I know which judgment you're talking about, but it's the judgment that addressed the Natrona property.
Right. Okay.
And it was entered in the month of December.
December 10, filed December.
That sounds pretty accurate.
Order partially denying and partially granting defendant's motion for judgment as a matter of law.
Right.
Okay, that was December 10.
I hope I answered your question.
Yes. Thanks.
Because there was a dispute among Jones, both with respect, our thrust was at North 8 Mile. That's where the vehicles were.
Right.
As you can tell from modest reading of the pleadings, the Natrona property was almost an afterthought. If we've got to go down to the courthouse, might as well put them both before the court, okay? Rather than me tell you, we want to let a judge tell you. Okay, when the judge told us, we didn't continue to resist. Within less than 30 days, we got the application submitted. We are complying with the law. I very much want to answer your question. I want to go back to the other points that you brought up. I thought they were all questions. Changing the recommendation, I don't know where you misunderstood me. What I intended to do, speaking about that, I understood it was based on the comments. By the way, apparently you got the comments the 6th, the same time I got them. Except, that's not true. I got the first 2 because they came in earlier, and I was in touch, and I read them. But they're the same generic variety as the other 4. So I got the bulk of them today. And I thought I ought to try and address those. But I certainly don't have any problem with any staff or elected or appointed officials changing their mind. That's not the problem. That's not what I tried to address here. What I tried to address is that the objections are not meritorious. Saying I bought my property and I liked it the way, but I bought it 2 years ago?
It's all right. Point's well taken, Mr. Bondi. I'd like to move along if we can. We've got a lot of people.
The size of, I will, Mr. Chairman, I need to address what was brought to my attention, the size of the neighborhood. So our point of view on that, Mr. Bailey, is you, as a appointed member, can take any size you want. But we didn't want to exclude members of the commission from what's on the highway. If we had, you'd say, well, didn't you kind of cherry pick them here? Then you get us the other way. No, what we did is This is Natrona County. You're the Natrona County Plan Commission. So we brought it in from the county all the way. And it's the neighborhood, you can make it any size you want. But I don't think you're gonna find any resorts in the area. I don't think you're gonna find any livestock operations out there. You're not gonna find anyone that's gonna tell you that what's been going on in Tom Jones's property for almost a century now is detrimental to their livestock. These people are talking about what they don't like looking at. None of them seem to pick up on the, talking about the fencing. They don't seem to understand that. They don't say that the fencing you propose would be inadequate. They say it should be screened, but it shouldn't be seen. But they don't seem to address that the proposal is for them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your courtesy.
Thank you,
But
Mr. Bond.
I stand around to answer any questions. I didn't mean to walk away if I left some here.
That's all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this agenda item?
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm Richard Gilbert, and I own Dick License Record Service since 1950. And I've hauled cars out there for Tom Jones, but his kids got too drunk to drive or rolled them over, wrecked them, whatever. I worked at the highway patrol for up until 2 years ago. And when I lost my wife,
Excuse me, Dick.
Can we get an address, please?
Oh, we need an address, please.
I'm sorry, 3900 Wolf Creek Road, Casper, Wyoming. I'm sorry. This summer, or this winter so far, I've had NCHS teacher up there come out and look and brought 20, 25 children out there to look at wrecked cars, take pictures of them, and she's been out there 2 times this winter. Some days when it's real nice, and days when it's snowing and blowing. And I don't, as long as I've known 8 Mile Road and been in the towing business all these years, going on 64 years. And I had 2 service stations here in town at one time, Conditional and Standard Oil. And I've told many, many, many people. And the kids come out there and they say, do you remember this, Rick? My granddad, he's passed away now, but you wouldn't happen to remember the car, would you? And I said, some of them I do, some of them I don't. I can tell you lots of stories, blood-curdling stories. And I still have his junkyard. And I'll keep it as long as I'm alive, or as long as my daughter's alive. And if I don't, I'm gonna will it to Tom Dana Jones. And I've got probably close to 500 cars in my yard out there. And you're talking about batteries, drainage coming out of them, and stuff like that. You're welcome to come in our yard and take a look and find one car that's still leaking. And I can guarantee you that the battery's still in the thing, it's still got gasoline in the gas tank, and it's still got oil in it. But you won't find a leak in any of them out there in my yard. And this has been going on since I built my place out there in 1959, 58 and 59 when I built it. And I still got cars sitting there that I hauled in there that many years ago. And all those cars that Dana Jones and Judy's got on 8 Mile Road or out in Natrona is nothing more than history. And they've got the right deal to say that they would like to keep the history going, just like they do back in Washington, D.C. at the Naval, I can't think of the name of it, but Smithsonian, and this is all history. And that's what all Dana Jones and Judy is doing, is protecting the old history that their granddad might have done. They used on fire trucks out there. There's been people that was working for the volunteer fire departments. And Dana Jones and Judy would love to have somebody come out there and take pictures of some of the stuff that they've got. The kids up at NC up there, and the teacher up there that's teaching